All right. Well, thank you so much, Ebony, and welcome to all of you out there who are dialing in, watching online, and have joined this telephone town hall all across New Mexico's first congressional district. I'm Melanie Stansbury, and I'm deeply proud to serve as your Congresswoman. New Mexico's first congressional district includes much of the Albuquerque metro area and Rio Rancho. It goes up to Sandoval County and has Bernalillo. It has the East Mountains and goes all the way out to Santa Rosa, down to Roswell, and picks up Lincoln County and the east side of Valencia County. And as a native New Mexican who ran for office because I believe deeply in our communities and in the future of our state, it's truly an honor and a privilege every single day to be able to represent this district and the amazing communities that it includes. And so I want to say thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. We are joined from folks from all 10 counties across our district, and we're also really honored to be joined by my dear friend Javier Martinez, who is also an Albuquerquean, who grew up here in Albuquerque. I'm a West Sider, went to Cibola High School. He went to school on the East Side, but we still come together to do that collaborative work for our state. Of course, we have rivalries just like everywhere. But so honored to have the speaker online today to talk to us about what the state is doing to help backstop much of what's happening at the federal level and to make sure that New Mexicans are cared for. Today, we want to spend some time on this call telling you about what's happening in Washington, D.C., what we're doing here in New Mexico's first congressional district, how our congressional office works. And then I'll turn it over to the speaker who'll talk about what the state has planned over the coming months, especially as we head into the January session next year, and how we're going to navigate the really challenging issues that are coming down the pike, especially with huge cuts to the federal workforce and the passage of a really devastating bill a few weeks ago that's going to cut healthcare, food assistance, and education to tens of thousands of New Mexicans. But I want to start by talking about Social Security. This week is the 90th anniversary of the passage of the Social Security Act. And we just introduced a bill right before I came home to New Mexico called the Hands Off Social Security to help protect Social Security, as you've probably seen on the news. And it's very frightening, of course, for anyone who depends on Social Security for their survival. The current administration has been talking about privatizing Social Security, and many of the changes that they've made to services over the last 7 to 8 months have really made it difficult for individuals and families to access their benefits. Here in New Mexico, we actually have one of the largest service centers in the entire United States. Our call center in Albuquerque helps seniors and individuals with disabilities all over the state, all over the country, in fact. So we're deeply proud of the people who work at Social Security and grateful for their service. And I want to start off by saying to all of our federal workers out there, whether you work at Social Security, you work at Forest Service, IRS, BLM, the national labs, the military, we're so grateful that you are serving, and please stay in there, stay strong. We're rooting for you. And one of the things that my office can do is help federal employees who are struggling. And we work a lot very closely with the federal advocates who are the unions and other folks who are helping to protect our federal workforce. But in terms of Social Security, the bill we just introduced would make it illegal essentially for the administration to try to privatize Social Security or to change the way the benefits are structured or to take away telephone services or other services that you use to access your benefits or get questions answered. And so that's one of our key pieces of legislation that we're fighting for right now. We also wanted to focus a little bit tonight about our work on veterans issues. For me, this is very near and dear to my heart. I come from a veteran family. My partner is a veteran, and we do a tremendous amount of work in our office to try to expand veterans benefits, to improve services through the VA, and to make sure that everyone is getting the services that they earned through their service to this nation. and to help support our veterans all across New Mexico. And one of the things that we're so proud of is that New Mexico has one of the highest ratios of veterans of any state in the country, because as we all know, service is a part of who we are. It's part of our identity and our culture. In addition to our work on veterans issues and Social Security, since my office first was stood up in 2021 when I took office, we're heavily focused in my office on economic development for New Mexico because, as we all know, our state struggles to maintain economic opportunity. So one of our keystones is to really build an economy that our people can grow up in and stay home for and thrive in. And so we have spent much of my time in office bringing home millions of dollars to invest in incubators and business startups and the Small Business Administration and rural development and tribal communities. And that's all part of the economic development that we're doing, as well as fighting for fair wages, for tax cuts for working families. I'm proud to be one of the primary advocates for the expansion of the child tax credit, which for those of you who got it starting with the pandemic is the biggest program ever in American history after Social Security and some of our other programs to really address poverty across our communities. The other big areas that my office works a lot on are what I call community well-being, which are all the building blocks that we know everyone in our community needs. And that means having affordable housing. It means being able to afford food. And if you're not able to access food assistance, it means addressing crime and public safety issues. We brought home tens of millions of dollars through my office in partnership with our local sheriff and police departments for community policing and technology. We've been working on the fentanyl crisis, which is also near and dear to my heart, having lost a loved one to the fentanyl crisis. We work a lot on education. Happy back to school. I know a lot of you are back to school today. And because my background is actually in the sciences and working on water issues, we work a lot on land and water issues. And to that point, I grew up in a hardworking family here in New Mexico. I was born in Farmington, grew up here in Albuquerque. I grew up working with my hands. My family owned a small irrigation company growing up. And so I grew up digging ditches and planting trees. And so I know what it's like to earn a hard-earned living out on these mean streets. And so, you know, being able to protect our land and water is not only essential to our culture and our way of life, but also to be able to earn a dignified living. And so those are some of the big issues that we're fighting for. But of course, here in the current moment, especially as the current administration has taken office, we've really seen an unprecedented attack at the federal level on our federal workforce. The separation of powers that are written into the Constitution. And so I'm part of a group of rapid response within the Democratic caucus in Congress to respond in Congress and the courts and in our communities to the attacks we're seeing on our democracy. We're doing a lot of work to help support legislators in other states who are facing gerrymandering and redistricting. As we know, Texas right now, everyone is watching what's happening with this very unusual gerrymandering of the Texas maps, which are designed to try to stack the odds against the people being able to choose their own representatives. And so a lot of our work is also at the national level to help protect our democracy. And I've been really honored this year to serve in a leadership role as the ranking member on a new committee called the DOGE Subcommittee. And I took that assignment partly because I had worked as a budget analyst for the federal government, and I believe in cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. But I also had a bad feeling about what direction it was going to take under this administration. And so I have been really grateful for the opportunity to be deep in the fight to defend and to fight against the cutbacks to programs that are so essential. And so I'll close out here by just talking briefly, you know, on 4th of July, the president signed into law a very expansive bill that they named the Big Beautiful Bill. I call it the Big Ugly Bill, or the BUB. because this bill has catastrophic cuts to programs that so many New Mexicans depend on. And that includes cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, and will, unfortunately, we anticipate it's going to jack up healthcare premiums and prescription drug costs across the board. So every New Mexican is going to be facing over the next 2 years really significant healthcare impacts, and our hospitals and our clinics and our healthcare providers who are already in crisis are trying to figure out how to navigate these healthcare cuts. And we're working very closely with the governor and the state legislature to try to help New Mexico navigate its way through this. We're working very closely with the food banks in the state to figure out how cuts to SNAP and what was long called food stamps is going to be shored up to help families who might be impacted by that. And of course, with school starting back, there were significant changes in that bill to Pell Grants and to student loan programs. And so trying to figure out how to help our colleges and universities navigate that. And that's also a big challenge here in New Mexico, because we are fortunate to have this amazing legislature that made New Mexico the first state in the country to guarantee a free college education to any New Mexican going to a public institution. But part of what made that possible was also support through the Pell Grant program. And so we'll be working very closely with the governor and the legislature to try to figure out how to navigate that. But what I want folks to know is that we're really fortunate to live in New Mexico because we have a delegation with 5 members who are from New Mexico who care deeply about our people. We've got a legislature with a speaker that includes Javier Martinez and this amazing leadership team in the House and in the Senate. We've got a governor who's fighting for us. And we've got leadership at the county and the city level that is doing everything they can to try to make the cuts and attacks we're seeing on our democracy less harmful to our communities, and to really think about, as we are trying to navigate this space, what do we build as we get through this really difficult time? Because it's not enough to just fight back. We have to also have hope, and we have to dream big, and we have to think about how we rebuild and build differently when we come out the other side of this. And so there's no one I would rather be in the trenches with than our speaker Javier Martinez. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for the invitation, and how blessed are we to have you fighting for us in Washington. You are a courageous, principled leader. You're a fighter. You are a pragmatic legislator who knows how to legislate. So thank you again. Look, in New Mexico, over the last 7 years, we've worked really hard, not only to be good fiscal stewards of your tax dollars, but also to build out programs that make life more affordable for everyday New Mexicans. Congresswoman, you mentioned free college. That is inclusive of 2-year colleges. That is inclusive of 4-year universities, first in the nation to do so. You played a huge role in that as a member of the State House back in the day. In addition to that, remember that we've got a full cradle-to-career public education system, starting with early childhood education. We are the first state to guarantee in its constitution a fully funded right to early childhood education, and that is inclusive of home visiting all the way to child care and pre-K. We've got one of the lowest costs for child care in the entire country thanks to that work. In addition to that, we worked really hard to fix a tax code. We have one of the most progressive tax codes in the entire country. We've got one of the most generous working family tax credits in the book. We have a state-level child tax credit. These are all designed to put money back in the pockets of hardworking New Mexican families like the ones that are listening here today. That's in light of what happened in Washington with this budget resolution, where hundreds of millions of dollars were transferred to the wealthiest for tax cuts. Not in New Mexico. New Mexico, we've done the opposite. We've actually, those who can pay a little more to pay a little more. or those who work hard and play by the rules to get a little bit of a break. And then lastly, we've worked really hard to make healthcare affordable in a state that has a shortage of healthcare access, quite frankly. We created the Healthcare Affordability Fund, which allows for people on the Obamacare Health Exchange to, in addition to the federal subsidy to pay for the premium, they get a state subsidy. So on average, you're not paying any more than $30-40 a month, depending on your income, for healthcare coverage on the Obamacare exchange. And that's not for the cheapest one. I'm talking for the Cadillac one. I'm talking for the best of the best. Thanks to the work of your New Mexico State Legislature. And again, this is a lot of stuff that happened when Congresswoman Stansbury was a member of the state house. As we look at the budget resolution that passed the federal Congress last month, and we take stock of the impact in New Mexico, it's a huge impact. In fact, there was a New York Times story, I believe yesterday or today, that speaks specifically to the big impact in New Mexico. We're looking at 500,000 New Mexicans losing access to their health care. We're looking at close to 120,000 or so who are going to see at least reductions in their food stamps. For many of them, they're going to see a complete elimination. These are big ticket items that the state is going to have to figure out how to cover. Because we've been good fiscal stewards of your money. We've got money set aside essentially for a rainy day. We've got a great reserves. We've got reserves upwards of 33%, inclusive of permanent funds, sovereign wealth funds, inclusive of stabilization funds that we've set aside. We have also an early childhood trust fund, which generates roughly $500 million a year for early childhood. This legislative session, sort of thinking ahead, we were looking at creating a Medicaid trust fund, which we did create, and which we will be funding in the legislative sessions to come. Because remember, Republicans in Congress passed this big, ugly bill, but they didn't have the courage to actually implement those drastic cuts until after the 2026 election, because they know it's a losing message for them and it's a losing battle for them. But again, New Mexico has done a good job of saving the surplus money that we've had over the last several years, and we are ready to invest it to offset some of those cuts. Let me be clear. New Mexico, and really no state in the union, is in a position to absorb the enormity and the immensity of these cuts. These cuts are straight up cruel. These cuts are straight up draconian. These cuts are designed specifically to undermine the social safety net. It's what the Congresswoman spoke to earlier with Social Security. They've gutted that office so badly that if you call because you have a question about your Social Security, you may not get somebody on the other end of the line to pick up the phone, leading to your frustration with an agency and leading them to push for things like privatization. This is an old playbook. This is an old playbook from conservatives in decades past, and sadly we're seeing it play out in front of our eyes. But your New Mexico State Legislature, your House of Representatives, State Senate, your governor will continue to fight to make sure that no New Mexican goes hungry, to make sure that no kid goes without an education, to make sure that no child goes without child care, to make sure that no senior goes without a meal or goes without shelter. So that's what we'll be working on. And again, we're blessed to have the leadership of the Congresswoman as well as the other 4 members of our federal delegation. They are champions. They are courageous. They are fighting for us every single day. I'll turn it back to you, Congresswoman.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. And I know we will all be working really closely together to try to figure out how to protect New Mexicans all across the state as pieces of this bill go into effect. But it is, as you noted, many of the more draconian cuts do not take effect until after the election. They did that on purpose to try to insulate themselves politically. However, once Americans actually understand what's in this bill and how it's going to impact them, including like huge cuts to everyone's healthcare access, it's very clear that the vast majority of Americans do not support this bill. And so, I'm hopeful that pieces of it as we go will get repealed, but I expect that in the meantime, in order to protect the well-being of New Mexicans, we're going to have to work really closely with the state and potentially tap into some of the state funds to address some of the healthcare and food assistance gaps. And so I know a lot of people who came to my town halls over the last 7 months were really, really worried that they were going to get cut off from food assistance and groceries and healthcare. And we're going to do our best to try to mitigate the impacts, but there are going to be impacts, and that's just the reality of this situation. So with that, I want to open it up for questions. I'll turn it back to Ebony for our first question and look forward to hearing from you all.
Thank you, Congresswoman. For those of you just joining us, please press *3 on your phone if you'd like to ask a question. And if you'd like to subscribe to our newsletter, please press *6. So right now we have Amber from Albuquerque on the line. Amber, you are live with Congresswoman Stansbury and Speaker Martinez.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Hi, Amber.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, hi.
Hello, I'm my main question. I have so many, but right now my main question is concerning Medicaid, which you've already started to address. I'm personally a Medicaid provider for kids and adults with autism spectrum disorder, and on top of that, I have two brothers with autism or with Down syndrome and autism spectrum disorder who could also be profoundly affected. Do we have any guidelines on who's going to be affected? Because I know a lot of my clients are very like, is it going to be us, or nobody really knows who's going to be affected? Can we get some clarity on that?
Yes. So the governor's office has been doing a deep dive on breaking down how the changes in this bill might affect healthcare access in New Mexico. And I know this is not a satisfactory answer right in this particular moment, but the bill is almost 900 pages long, and half of it deals with changes to the healthcare system. And so at the macro level, what this bill does is essentially cut about $1 trillion out of the healthcare system. And it does it through all different mechanisms. And so like when you hear on the news that it's redistributing wealth from low income and seniors to the ultra wealthy, basically they put into place $4 trillion in tax breaks, permanent tax breaks for billionaires so that they could write off their estate taxes and write off luncheons on yachts. Literally, this is what's in the bill. And they paid for it by cutting $1 trillion in healthcare. And you're going to see a lot of different estimates of how many people are going to be impacted, because a lot of what the bill does is implement these really draconian and difficult paperwork requirements, which have been implemented in other states. And essentially the way they save money is they make it so hard to stay on Medicaid, because you have to go back and prove every month that you deserve to be on it or you qualify to be on it, that people lose their health care without even knowing it. And so I think one of the challenges in both estimating how it's going to impact individuals as well as providers is that a lot of the implementation is going to come down to how well at a local level the state and local healthcare providers are able to help families navigate the new requirements, the kind of backstop systems that we put into place in New Mexico. You know, Speaker Martinez just talked about the Medicaid trust fund. The state of New Mexico is really lucky right now. We have a bunch of new money coming into the state from our revenues from natural resource development on state lands. And so we have some extra money, but it's not enough to cover all of the healthcare costs that are going to be lost. But the governor is talking to, partly because it's state funds, and the legislature is talking to our major healthcare networks, hospitals, clinics, et cetera. So it's hard to estimate at this point, like who exactly is going to be impacted. But it includes everything from new work requirements, which essentially, like I said, require now that people have to prove monthly that they're not able-bodied under the law. It changes who qualifies and how. It changes the formulas for healthcare providers, whether you work in, disability services or you work in, emergency care, all of the formulas are going to be scrambled and changed. So a lot of our hospitals are trying to figure out what that means for them. So we don't have an easy answer right now, but that is exactly what the state is trying to do, so that if we have to deal with this, for example, in a special session or the upcoming session, we know where to put funds and backstops in place. But the reality is that likely everyone is going to be impacted, but the actual date for starting many of these cuts and new requirements are not until the end of next year. So at least I hope that kind of gives people a moment to, not be in full panic mode. But we do expect, I just met with Blue Cross a few weeks ago. They are expecting, for example, to increase their premiums dramatically in the next renewal because they cut the federal subsidies for the marketplace. And so everyone's health insurance is going to go up starting January 1. And that's just because they cut the federal subsidies. And so, the downstream effects of that are, like, I grew up without health insurance. When people don't have access to healthcare, whether it's Medicaid or Medicare, or their insurance is too expensive, they don't get care. And when they don't get care, oftentimes, once it is a crisis, either the worst possible outcome happens, or they end up in an emergency room and the cost of care skyrockets. And of course, our emergency rooms are already overwhelmed. So, we're in a pretty bleak and chaotic moment in terms of healthcare. And I think all New Mexicans are going to feel the impact. It's going to, for each of us, it might feel different. If you do have health insurance, it might mean that your doctor retires or the clinic you go to closes. For people in Medicaid, you might find out you have all this new paperwork you have to deal with. For people in Medicare, and having been the primary caretaker of my mom, it's a cutback of all the extra supplemental programs that you might have been getting through your Medicare programs. So it's going to be some hard times. All right, Ebony, next question.
Thank you, Congresswoman. If you'd like to ask a question, please press *3 now on your phone. Again, that's *3 to ask a question. Next up, we have Shirley from Advocacy on the line. Shirley, you're live with Congresswoman Stansbury and Speaker Martinez.
Hi.
Hi.
Glad to be with you.
Yeah, thanks for calling.
My husband and I are both on Medicare and Social Security. And we also are very fortunate to afford a supplemental that's really good. But I'm afraid that our premiums are going to go up for Medicare. And how is this going to affect us? I am currently going through cancer therapy. And so, it's a long, drawn-out thing. And I'm just worried that something's going to happen to that, because that therapy is going to go way into next year. So I'm worried that that's going to affect our premiums and, what they're doing in Washington, and how's that going to affect that. And also, we're not young. We're in our 70s. And so things are going to start breaking down and we're going to get ill. And I just hope that we're able to afford all this.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead. Shirley, are you still there?
I think we got disconnected, Congresswoman.
Well, let me just say quickly that my heart really truly goes out to you and to everyone out there who is struggling with healthcare challenges, whether that's getting access to care or just yourself struggling with just your health, because it's hard to get through the day when you're having those kinds of healthcare issues. We don't know the full effects of what's going to happen on this as this gets implemented over the next couple of years. And part of why we fought back, all 5 members of the New Mexico delegation were so fierce in our opposition to this bill, is because of the impacts to Medicaid and Medicare. And, part of the cuts that they put into place also changed prescription drug negotiations, which is insane. Like one of the biggest improvements that was made in healthcare was a bill we passed 2 years ago in the Inflation Reduction Act that allowed for price negotiations for prescription drugs, which lowered drug prices for everyone. And they repealed key sections of that. So folks, prescription drugs and treatments are all going to go up. I suspect that as the really big impacts of this bill start to be felt in a really big way, the demand to repeal sections of this bill will be forcing the Republican majority to repeal some of this bill, because I don't know how our country and our healthcare system survives it in terms of providing access to healthcare. But I think in the meantime, people ask me every single day, what can we do to push back, to fight back, to have our voices heard? Here in New Mexico, we're listening, we're doing everything we can. And I think as folks are thinking about how to mobilize and help support in other areas, if you have friends and family that live in states or districts where their member of Congress voted to put this stuff into place, encourage them to call their member of Congress and ask for a repeal of the bill and some of these provisions, because at the end of the day, we don't have a strong enough majority in the Congress to repeal it without support from the Republicans who got their arms twisted by the president. So we just have to keep politically engaging, especially with our colleagues across the aisle. And I know a lot of people are skeptical and feeling hopeless, but we can't stop. We have to keep trying because if we don't, we'll lose everything. Speaker, I know you guys are doing a lot of thinking about how to shore up the healthcare system. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you're thinking about it through the legislature?
Yeah, absolutely. So before the end of the legislative session, I created a federal fund stabilization interim subcommittee, which actually has been meeting every month across the state to review all of these different impacts. Some of the recommendations that will come out of that process will inform our work in the 30-day session, and it'll allow us to know exactly where to put the dollars, right? And again, we are lucky. We've got a surplus, we've got a nice cushion of reserve, but we still cannot possibly offset every single cut that comes down from that bill. So that process that we are undergoing now will help inform. For example, you mentioned premiums on the Obamacare exchange that are expiring and were not renewed, and it's going to force people on the exchange to pay higher costs, higher price for coverage. We will be prepared to plug in those holes to make sure that your health care, at least in that case, remains affordable. One thing that we really, and this is where I, as a state legislator, really every single day I think about this, right? How do we ensure that our people in New Mexico are held as harmless as possible without taking the responsibility or the attention away from the White House and the Republican Congress, right? In other words, how do we not let them off the hook? Because the truth is, we could probably offset all these cuts for a year or two if we had to cover the entirety of these cuts. But after a while, and after this economy continues to tank, thanks to these tariffs and whatnot, our general fund will begin to suffer, right? And at some point, because we have a constitutionally mandated requirement to balance the budget every year, at some point we will run out of funds to cover. So it goes back to what you were just saying, right? We've got to force the Congress to repeal some of these sections of that bill to ensure that our people don't lose coverage for health care.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of two pieces of it. In the short term, to make sure that folks like the folks who are calling in are okay. The kind of short-term remedy is the state is prepared to try to protect families as much as we can here in New Mexico. As I said, we're really lucky to live in a state that can and is willing to do that. Other states are like, you're on your own, like, good luck. We don't care if you get kicked off your health care, but New Mexico does not do that. We fight for our people, we protect our people, and we're really lucky to live in a state that's willing to do that. But we have to, part of what we're going to have to do is, if the Republicans are not going to help repeal this law, part of why taking back the House next year and making sure that we put guardrails up and repeal key sections of this bill is so essential, is really an emergency in terms of protecting healthcare and well-being. But in the long term, the system's like so broken. We don't want to rebuild the existing system. And I know that's a big thing that Speaker Martinez and myself and others here in New Mexico have been working to try to really rethink healthcare in New Mexico and how we invest in all of these systems and programs to build out, a 21st century state-of-the-art healthcare program that's culturally informed, that meets the needs of New Mexicans, and that, as we're working at the state and federal level, we reform the system. And personally, I believe in universal healthcare, and that's what we need to be fighting for. So I know we've got a lot of people who want to ask questions. Ebony, I'm going to suggest that maybe we take 5 questions and then we'll do our best to get through them.
Okay, sounds good, Congresswoman. We have a few online questions, so I will go ahead and read one of those. We have a question from Lorraine, who asked, what can be done about vaccine availability since RFK Jr. is cutting funding for research and calling into question vaccination safety across the board? And then our next question comes from Kaylee from Facebook. Will state taxes remain the same, or will it go up and take up for the lack of federal funding?
Okay.
And then I will go back
can jump.
Sure.
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry. I can go rapid fire on that second question. The short answer is no. There are no plans to increase taxes to help offset these federal cuts. The work that we've done around the tax code has been smart, has been targeted. Again, giving relief to those who need it, seniors and Social Security benefits, working families, working people, middle class New Mexican. We've done that. We're going to stay true to that. If in the long future, we see that this bill is not rescinded, or at least sections of it not repealed, then we always have the ability to look at big industries and really the highest earners, right, which have up to this day been spared. But in terms of the short term, there are no plans to increase your taxes.
Thank you, Speaker. All right, Ebony, back to questions.
Thank you, Congresswoman. So I will go ahead and take another live question. Next, we have Anna. Anna, you're on the live with Congresswoman Stansbury and Speaker Martinez.
Hello, and thank you for taking my question. My name is Anna Phillips. I'm a charter school director serving secondary students in the Albuquerque metro and surrounding communities. I'd like to know what is specifically being done, what work is being done to ensure that our schools continue to receive the federal funds on which so many of us depend on in order to serve the most vulnerable students. And specifically all Title I parts, Title II, Title III, the Gear Up program for college access, as well as the reimbursement through Medicaid for special education ancillary services.
Got it. Thank you, Anna, and thank you for being an educator. We're going to circle back to answers in just a moment once we get through a few more questions. Let's go ahead and take 2 more.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next, we have Nathan from Rio Rancho. Nathan, you are live with Congresswoman Stansbury and Speaker Martinez.
Hi, yeah. So the day that the bill got passed, I got an email from the Social Security Administration applauding the passage of the legislation. So the only reason, I'm a younger guy, the only reason Social Security has my email is that I created an account to check my, status and progress, and to check my, just to create an account with them. But they use that email to send me a political message, right?
Yep.
Saying that they applaud the passage, and I think that's completely inappropriate. And like when I got this email, I was a little gobsmacked, thinking, is this like, I know that the Trump administration regularly crosses lines, breaks norms, but I don't want to live in this world where after everything the great leader does, everyone has to send an email saying how great it is. Like, this is not what I intended when I created an account with this government agency for them to send me political messages. So in your role in oversight, is that something you can look into?
Yes, absolutely. And well, I'll talk a bit more about that message. It was false, a lie, untrue, and clearly a misuse of federal funds, and we're investigating it on the oversight committee. So thank you for asking, and we'll take one more, and then we'll circle back in a moment too.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next up, we have Dawn from Albuquerque. Dawn, you are live with Congresswoman Stansbury and Speaker Martinez.
Hi, guys. Hello?
Hi.
Hi. It's a pleasure to speak with you. I'm here. I had to move down here from Taos. You know, the housing up there has just become a total wreck. Nobody that's on Social Security can survive, and I had to move into the war zone. And it's horrible here, and I am so sad with our state. I have disabilities myself. I've been just struggling to get therapy and mental health. And to be quite honest, I don't mean to be too critical, but I appreciate, you know, what RFK is trying to do as far as recovery, and I think he's got some great ideas, I guess. And my question would be, like, you know, like how, you know, instead of being so, you know, I'm a military brat too, you know, and it's like respect the office. So I'm having a hard time with that because I think RFK really does have some good work. And I mean, I'm sitting here as a sociologist watching these kids get exposed to more trauma and more trauma and more trauma and open air methamphetamines. I'm also studying criminology, and I get all the, you know, wanting to legalize substances, but man, you know, I mean, when we have 13-year-olds down here killing people, it's just really hard for me just to be like, you know, everything that they're trying to do is evil. So I guess, you know, I'd really just please, can you just please like stop with a hayride and maybe just like work with the administration the best that you can. I know it's nearly impossible because I understand politics, but man, these people here are hurting. I mean, this stuff keeps me sober, but the fentanyl is it's awful. It is awful, and it's disgusting. And I'm an actor too, and I worked on Breaking Bad, and I'm disgusted because as soon as we started glamorizing Breaking Bad, this town turned into a meth head, and it's like it's something that you guys are celebrating, and I just feel like I agree with, you know, compassionate use, but like, what about compassionate use for me as a straight person that wants a painkiller? It's easier for me to get fentanyl than to get painkiller to get me off disability. I'm just having a hard time with everything right now, you know?
Yeah.
And it's,
oh, go ahead. Oh, Dawn, are you still there?
I'm having a piss test. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. If you have a few more things, we'll talk about some of the things we're doing around behavioral health. Go ahead.
I don't want to go on and on. I can because you know, I'm in stress and I'm struggled, you know, to leave a beautiful place like Taos and seeing the kids up there. I was a teacher up there. I've had kids knock themselves off with that fentanyl stuff, and I just don't think it's a joke, you know. I think so, and I honestly believe that some, not all, some, you know, like holding people accountable. I lived in Taos for 30 years. I've watched these kids grow up in welfare families. I'm grateful because I self-actualize. Don't just sit there on welfare and the system. They're not doing nothing with their lives. It's awful. It's awful to see, and then they get caught up in these drugs. And they're so available. I mean, literally, I don't even have to, you know, I could just scream out the door. I'm in pain.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, and then too, with the resist stuff, I don't really get.
Dawn.
Because like I
Because,
said,
Dawn,
I'm a military
yeah,
brat.
Dawn, we have so many people on the phone who also want to share their point of view. Can we press pause and talk about behavioral health and kind of what we're doing to try to address it? Is that okay? And we can have our folks follow up to talk about some of the other issues as well.
Yes, thank you for your time.
Of course, of
Thank you.
course. And so actually this is a good time for me to give out our phone number for our office, and to talk a little bit about casework in our office. So one of the things that we do as a congressional office is a lot of casework to help people who are struggling with federal programs. For example, if your veterans benefits have been cut off or you've lost some paperwork, if your Social Security check hasn't come through, if you're waiting for an IRS return and you still haven't gotten it, you're having problems with Medicaid or Medicare or Social Security, we have a whole casework team who can help individuals work on those issues, and your own specific case. So I'm going to give everyone our phone number right now. So if you can get out a pen, but we'll also post it online. Our phone number to my office is 505 346 6781. 505 346 6781. And we work on cases every single day. We work on immigration cases, Social Security cases, behavioral health cases. So please don't be shy. Please feel free to call our office. You don't just have to call us to tell us how you're feeling about politics. Like, we literally can help with federal programs. So just taking up the healthcare piece, and especially the fentanyl crisis, I completely agree with Dawn that we have to use every tool in the toolbox, and that we're in crisis, especially around fentanyl and meth and drugs that are on the streets. All you have to do is drive down Central and you see it. It's on the streets. A lot of that is a national trend, and what we've seen is that fentanyl peaked, we think, over the last 2 years, but we're still at kind of the top of the spike in fentanyl use. And it's a combination of just the availability of it, as you said, being able to yell out your door. It's all over the place. And so we're kind of taking a three-pronged approach around addressing the drug crisis in New Mexico. We got to actually stop drugs from coming in. And so we work a lot with both federal, state, and local law enforcement to crack down on the drug cartels, to make sure that they have drug detection technology, that we're providing funding and helping local law enforcement get access to grants and funding to increase their crime fighting capabilities, because we got to keep the drugs out of our community. And we're understaffed across every law enforcement mechanism that there is. But I also grew up with folks who struggled with drug addiction, and I don't personally think that criminalizing addiction is the solution. You need to actually have treatment and recovery options. And New Mexico experienced a huge loss of treatment options during the last governor's tenure because of how the system got dismantled. And so one of the things that we're doing in my office is helping to bring home federal grants through HRSA, HHS, Medicaid, to invest in and build out clinics for people to get treatment. And that includes everything from, we're working with a clinic in the International District called First Nations, which also serves patients under Indian Health Service. You can walk off the street, and if you need harm reduction, if you're a user, you're trying to get into recovery, or you have a health issue, or you need to see a dentist, we're helping to try to get more funding to build out clinics. So we've helped fund multiple mental and behavioral health programs for recovery. We're also working on a brand new program in the town of Bernalillo, because there's virtually no services in Sandoval County. We just talked to Sandia Pueblo a few days ago, about building out more behavioral health services with the Pueblo. And we're doing lots of work in the rural areas, but it's not enough. And so, we're like at the tip of the crisis, and we just got to keep working with our state, federal, local partners to get the drugs off the street and to get the recovery to the people and to build out the systems to do that. So we're also working very closely in my office with our state legislators, including the state legislators and city councilors, especially on the east side of Albuquerque, where the addiction crisis is, spilling into the streets. But obviously, it affects every single family. And my tact in terms of working with this administration, I think you got to be honest with people. Like, if they're doing bad things, you got to call it out. And this administration is really gutted core programs around addiction recovery and funding for clinics. And so while they may have good ideas that they like to put out press releases on, they're actually cutting the funding for the programs. And so it's not just like hating on them, it's saying, hey, you're cutting vital programs that are so important for our communities, and they're going to be harmed if you don't restore those funding that you've cut. And so we actually work a lot across the aisle. I do a huge amount of bipartisan work, especially in healthcare and behavioral health. I'm a member of the bipartisan fentanyl crisis, and we are letter writing, calling, grant writing every single day, trying to get funding from the administration back to New Mexico to help address these issues. So that is kind of the picture around behavioral health. I'll just say quickly around vaccines. There is a problem right now because the federal government and the current administration is very anti-vax. That is, there's lots of people who fall in different spaces and how they feel about vaccines. But the reality is we do have to make federal investments in vaccines in order to have them available. Whether you use them on your own body or not is your own choice. But the federal subsidization of vaccines is really important to prevent the spread of mass diseases. And we've seen, even just in the last few months, a measles outbreak here in New Mexico and in Texas. But what I can tell you is that we're lucky to have a governor and a state legislature that understands healthcare and is working really closely with our health department and our local health entities to try to make sure there's still vaccine accessibility. But the kind of bigger picture of, the federal investments in vaccine development have been cut dramatically, and that could affect, our exposure to various diseases in the coming years. And that's part of why we're fighting back against that. I'm going to talk about education here, and then I'll turn it over to the speaker to talk about behavioral health and education. And also say quickly on the Social Security question, as I mentioned, the email that we all received from Social Security Administration after the passage of the Big Ugly Bill was a lie. The bill, somebody just texted me today something saying that the bill cut tax on Social Security. The bill did not cut tax on Social Security. New Mexico cut tax on Social Security. We did that in a bipartisan basis, state taxes. What the federal government did put in the Big Ugly Bill was a change in the exemption you can take as a senior. But if you're a low income senior, you're already taking the maximum exemption. Or if you're an upper income senior, it's not going to affect your taxes. So there's only a very small sliver of seniors that will be impacted by this change in the tax code. It does not cut your taxes on your Social Security. That's just a lie. The administration should never have sent that email out. And so, as I mentioned, the oversight committee that I serve on is investigating that. But I know a lot of people are wondering, like, if they're doing things that break the rules, why aren't they being held accountable? And part of the challenge is the normal law enforcement for the federal government is the Department of Justice. And Department of Justice is not currently prosecuting a lot of federal cases for, yeah, I'm sure you all watch the news, so you know what's going on. But we're still doing oversight in the oversight committee, and that's certainly something that we're doing oversight on. Finally, education. The president ran on a platform of dismantling Department of Education, and they have not been shy about their intent to do that. I absolutely oppose that 100%, and it's illegal. You can't dismantle federally created, congressionally mandated departments without congressional consent. And so what we're doing to fight back is we're actually suing them in the courts. So the administration has kind of like piecemeal been trying to dismantle Department of Education. They've been withholding funds to school districts, including here in New Mexico. They fired a bunch of employees that were, doing civil rights enforcement and distributing grants. They are trying to move certain pieces of Department of Education to different places. And the kind of net effect is that it's created a lot of chaos for our schools, whether it's K through 12 or our community colleges and technical colleges. And so a lot of the, again, short term, long term, the short term is we have to fight back in the courts because what they're doing is just not legal. And a few weeks ago, the administration announced that they were going to withhold billions of dollars in title funding for our schools across the country. New Mexico's delegation fought back. We have a commitment, it'll be restored. We're still waiting for all the funds to be restored, but they know they're breaking the law. And so part of our job as your representatives is to hold them accountable and make sure that they're complying with the law. And we're doing that through a combination of oversight, court cases, and fighting back in our communities. But at the end of the day, we fully anticipate that they're going to try to move legislation at some point to dismantle Department of Education. And, that it's important to understand the purpose of Department of Education is to make sure that every single student, no matter where you live, where you were born, what your zip code is, what your income level is, that you have access to an equal education. And that was not the case in American history. And so Department of Education is a outgrowth of the civil rights movement. Part of the key function of Department of Education is to enforce civil rights standards so that kids are not denied access to education because of, race, religion, creed, gender, where they grow up. And so it's important that we have those programs in place because they protect our kids and their ability to access programs, including the funding for special education. So it's one of our biggest battles. It's something that I'm part of, like I said, this task force in the Democratic caucus. And so we're working to try to protect Department of Education. So I'm going to turn it to Speaker Martinez because the state is in the more creative mode in problem solving. We're kind of at the federal level trying to protect what we have, but the state has been doing a lot of work to try to imagine how to solve these problems in a much more, innovative way. So Speaker, go ahead.
Yeah, so, I talked about what we've done with regard to the Obamacare exchange and the healthcare affordability fund. I've talked about child care, pre-K. I've talked about free college. You mentioned Social Security taxes. You're absolutely right. We did that 3 or 4 years ago. Behavioral health, that's a huge, huge issue and what really feeds a lot of what we see in the international district. I grew up in that district. My mom still lives there. My uncles and others still live in that community. It breaks my heart to see what's happening there. And if you go back 10 years ago, as you mentioned, Congresswoman, the prior governor gutted what little behavioral health system we had at the time, and it completely evaporated overnight. So since we've been working to rebuild it, this last legislative session, we've had a bill that creates a behavioral health regional hub across the state. The goal is for no person who wants treatment, who wants support, to live more than 100 miles from a treatment facility. That bill was passed, like I said, it was funded with over $250 million. And attached to that was also a behavioral health trust fund that we hope to get up to $1 billion here in the next few years. The idea being, again, you will never be more than a few miles from a treatment center, treatment facility, At the same time, we are investing in our universities and in our colleges to build up our behavioral health workforce, because that's the other piece that's been missing, is we need more social workers, counselors, therapists. So going all into all these strategies, we will be able to build a system that we can be proud of and that can lead the nation. But it will take time. I mean, just like it took time to dismantle it, it's going to take time for us to rebuild it.
Yeah, and I think that's a great place to kind of wrap things up, because I think, New Mexicans are always hearing the saying that we're at the bottom of all the lists. We're actually at the top of a bunch of amazing lists. We're the first state to guarantee early childhood education, and Speaker Martinez worked on that for a decade. We're the first state in the nation to guarantee post-secondary education, whether that's trade school or going to college. We're the first state in the nation to pass the Native American Voting Rights Act. We're the first state in the nation to pass some of the most forward-leaning climate legislation and grid modernization legislation. And so one of the things that I think is really hard in this moment is that because New Mexico is a humble place, our people are humble and come from humble roots. We are a place where many people are still struggling, where the cost of living is insane, where, we depend on those federal programs for healthcare and food and housing and all those things. But also we're incredibly innovative and creative. And the transformation that we've seen over the last essentially 6 to 8 years in the state legislature in terms of really generational investments in our people, those are going to continue to bear fruit for generations to come. And even though we're still in the thick of so many challenging issues, and now we're dealing with all of these, really difficult things coming down from Washington, D.C., the thing I want to just say is that as New Mexicans, we know this. We're strong, we're resilient, we're creative, we fight like hell, and we're not going to let them take away the things that make us who we are and make our state thrive. And I know for a lot of you who are listening in tonight, you were dialed in. And so I'm really appreciative to everyone who stayed on to listen. I want you to know that you're not alone if you're feeling scared, frustrated, angry as hell, happy, whatever you're feeling. We're here to serve you, to support you. Again, the phone number for my office is 505-346-6781. Wherever you live, whoever you are, my office is here to help you. And I know, Speaker Martinez, you have been such an extraordinary leader and such an open door in the legislature. Leave us with your words of wisdom for the good people of New Mexico.
Look, we've seen these playbooks before. We've had federal governments who in the past have done terrible things to undermine social safety nets, to undermine the rights and the freedoms of our communities, of our people. Please know that New Mexico will remain a beacon of hope and a North Star for the rest of this country. While the federal administration attacks our public schools, attacks transgender youth, attacks women, threat to receive their health care, in New Mexico, we've uplifted all those rights, and we will continue to do so. And it's because of the people on this call. The fact that you are on this call at 6:40 p.m., engaging in this democratic process with your Congresswoman and with a state legislator, tells me everything I need to know about how empowered our state is to lead not just New Mexico, but the entire country into the next decade. So let's go fight win. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Speaker. And I'll just say I am here for the August district work period. We're going to be all out and about. We're going to be in Santa Rosa on Saturday. If you live on the eastern side of the state, we'll be down in Lincoln, Chavez, and Otero County next week, and Valencia County, Sandoval. So please come to our events, follow us on social media, sign up for our newsletter. We send out regular updates. And if you need anything, please, please, please contact my office and know that we're here to fight, to serve, and to just love on all of our New Mexicans out there. So thank you guys for joining us tonight, and we're going to sign off. Thanks, everyone.